It all began with a single dream. In a small town in the Philippines, a young boy named Michael grew up surrounded by the sound of old radios playing timeless classics. His father, a simple tricycle driver, loved Elvis Presley. Every night after a long day of work, his father would sit outside their small house, turn on the radio, and sing along to Elvis songs with a smile on his face. Michael would sit next to him, fascinated by that deep, warm, soulful voice. He didn't understand the words at first, but he could feel the emotion. Michael started mimicking Elvis at the age of 6. At first, it was just for fun. He would grab a broomstick and use it as a microphone, shaking his hips like the king of rock and roll. His mother would laugh, his father would clap, and neighbors would gather outside to listen. Slowly, his voice developed something special. It carried that vintage tone that reminded everyone of Elvis himself. The little boy didn't know it then, but those moments on their small porch would one day lead him to the biggest stage in the world. Life, however, was not easy. His family struggled every day just to get by. There were nights when there wasn't enough food on the table. But even during the hardest times, Michael never stopped singing. He performed at local fiestas, weddings, and tiny street concerts, earning just enough to help his parents. Every peso counted. But his dream was bigger than the small stage in his town. He wanted to sing on the world stage. He wanted to prove that even someone from humble beginnings could shine. Years passed, and Michael worked various jobs just to keep his family afloat. But every night, after long shifts, he would practice. He studied Elvis's songs note by note, not to copy, but to understand the soul behind every lyric. He trained his voice to reach that unique tone. He watched old concert footage, memorized the movements, the facial expressions, the energy. By the time he turned 23, he had built a voice so similar to Elvis that people around him started calling him the Filipino Elvis. It was one of his friends who suggested something bold. "Why don't you audition for America's Got Talent?" Michael laughed at first. It seemed like an impossible dream. He didn't have much money, he had never been on a plane, and the thought of performing in front of millions terrified him. But deep inside, a little spark was burning. And sometimes, one spark is all it takes. For months, Michael saved every centavo he could. He performed at local bars and events, collected donations from kind people who believed in him, and one day, with tears in his eyes and hope in his heart, he bought a one-way ticket to the United States. It was the biggest risk of his life. The day of the AGT audition arrived. Michael stepped into the theater with nothing but his old guitar, a borrowed suit, and a heart full of dreams. The audience was buzzing. The judges sat at their table: Simon Cowell, Howie Mandel, Heidi Klum, and Sofia Vergara. The stage lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and Michael's hands were trembling. As he walked out, Simon Cowell leaned forward with that curious look he always gives when something interesting is about to happen. Simon asked him where he was from. Michael softly replied, "I'm from the Philippines." His voice carried a mix of nervousness and excitement. Simon asked what he was going to sing. Michael took a deep breath and said, "An Elvis Presley classic." The audience murmured. Some were skeptical. How many people had tried to impersonate Elvis before? But something in his eyes made Simon pay attention. The music started. The first guitar notes echoed through the theater. And then, Michael opened his mouth. The entire room froze. It wasn't just good. It wasn't just a cover. It was as if Elvis himself had returned. That deep, velvety, powerful tone filled the air. The way he controlled his vibrato, the way he breathed between the lines, the slight curl of his lip, the way he moved on stage, it was pure magic. The crowd gasped, some even stood up instantly. Heidi covered her mouth in shock. Sophia leaned forward with wide eyes. Howie grinned ear to ear. And Simon's face changed from curiosity to absolute astonishment. For a few seconds, Simon just stared. He didn't blink. His eyes widened, his mouth slightly opened. He leaned back in his chair, shook his head in disbelief, and then leaned forward again. The power of the voice on that stage wasn't just in the sound. It was in the way it carried memories. For older members of the audience, it brought back the golden age of rock and roll. For younger ones, it was a glimpse of a legend reborn. As the chorus hit, Michael's voice grew even stronger. Every note was crisp. Every lyric was wrapped in emotion. The entire theater began to clap along. And then something extraordinary happened. Simon Cowell smiled. A real, unfiltered smile. He turned to Howie and whispered something, and both nodded in approval. By the time Michael hit the final note, the crowd was on its feet. A thunderous standing ovation roared through the hall. Tears rolled down Michael's cheeks as he held the microphone close to his heart. This was the moment he had dreamed of his whole life. Simon pressed the button to speak. He didn't start with a joke or a sarcastic comment like he sometimes does. He just looked at Michael and said, "You just brought Elvis back to life." The crowd exploded again. Heidi called it unbelievable. Sophia said, "You sound exactly like him, but with your own heart." Howie added, "This was not an imitation. This was reincarnation." Simon then leaned forward, his voice softer now. "I've heard so many people try to do Elvis over the years," he said. "But you're different. This was real. I felt it, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was hearing something from another time. You have something truly special." And then Simon stood up. The crowd roared even louder. It was rare for Simon to give a standing ovation. Michael was trembling. His whole body felt weightless. And then came the unexpected, the golden buzzer. A single press, and the room exploded with gold confetti raining from the ceiling. Michael fell to his knees, overwhelmed by emotion. His hands covered his face as tears streamed down. Simon walked to the stage, gave him a hug, and whispered something that would change his life forever: never stop singing. In that moment, Michael wasn't just a boy from the Philippines anymore. He was a global sensation. His story spread like wildfire. Within hours, his performance went viral around the world. People from different countries commented, "I thought Elvis was back." Millions of views poured in, news outlets shared his journey, and fans started calling him the new king. But behind all the glamour, Michael remained humble. In interviews, he always said the same thing, that this was for his father, the man who introduced him to Elvis on that little radio in the Philippines. He said, "I sang to keep his spirit alive. I never imagined the world would listen." As the competition continued, Michael's performances kept growing stronger. Each time he stepped on stage, he didn't just sing songs. He told stories through his voice. He brought nostalgia, emotion, and fire. His stage presence became electric. Even people who weren't Elvis fans found themselves falling in love with the voice, because it was more than an impression, it was art. In one of the live shows, Simon said, "You're not an impersonator. You're an artist, and I believe Elvis himself would be proud of you." That single statement became a headline around the world. It gave hope to countless dreamers who came from small towns, people who thought they didn't stand a chance. Michael became a symbol of how far passion can take someone. Back in the Philippines, the small town where he grew up gathered around televisions and phones to watch him live. His father, now older, sat on the same wooden chair, tears in his eyes. He whispered, "That's my boy." It was a moment of pride that words could never describe. The finals came. Michael walked on stage with calm confidence. He looked at Simon and the judges, then at the crowd. He knew this wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about honoring the journey. The lights dimmed. The music began. And once again, he let the voice of Elvis rise through him like a living echo of history. Every note was perfect. Every line was soaked in soul. Simon closed his eyes during the chorus. The audience held their breath. And when Michael ended his performance with a powerful sustained note, the theater erupted like a storm of applause and emotion. Simon's eyes were wet. He stood up again, clapping slowly, smiling deeply. He didn't win with tricks. He didn't need pyrotechnics or flashy dancers. He won hearts with nothing but a voice, a dream, and a memory passed down from father to son. When the results were announced, the crowd screamed his name. Even those who didn't know him before were now fans. Michael walked off that stage with his head held high. He had made his mark on the world. Simon Cowell later said in an interview, "That was one of the best auditions I've ever witnessed. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And real talent is rare." Today, Michael tours around the world, bringing the voice of Elvis to new generations. He's performed in Las Vegas, London, Sydney, and of course, in his hometown in the Philippines where thousands gathered just to welcome him home. But no matter how big the stage gets, He always says the same thing at the end of each show: "This is for my father." His story reminds us that greatness can come from anywhere. It doesn't matter if you're born in a mansion or a small village. What matters is the fire inside you, the one that doesn't give up. Michael turned a childhood dream into a global phenomenon. And it all started with one Elvis song on a radio. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs hope today. Remember, dreams may take time, but they are never too far when your heart believes in them. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories from around the world. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep believing.